Our speaker today, and who has consented, thank you, Linda, for doing this, consented to be the speaker the first Sunday of every month, is Ted Jauw. Ted is no stranger to us. He is a mystic, and he believes in the goodness of all man and everything connected to it. He and his wife have a book, which, is it out already or is it in the process?
It's out, yeah.
It's out? Okay.
It's out in the lobby.
It's out in the lobby. Okay, it is out in the lobby. And Ted has another book coming out later this year. He is an author. He is a mystic. He is a poet. He is my friend, Ted Jauw.
They called him Pa-rum-pum-pum-pum. A newborn babe is born, Pa-rum-pa-pum-pum. Our finest gifts we bring, Pa-rum-pa-pum-pum. To lay before the king, Pa-rum-pa-pum-pum. Pum 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 pum, rum pum pum pum. We three kings of Orient are. Do you know that song? Keep going, right? Afar, field and fountain, moor and mountain, following yonder star. So those are all Epiphany songs. We just don't think of it that way, because Epiphany has changed for us. And so while we think we know what Epiphany is really a mystery. So if you give me that beat again, it's like double Dutch. When I went down to the river to pray, studying about that good old way, and who shall wear the starry crown? Oh Lord, show me the way. Oh mothers, let's go down, come on down. Oh mothers, let's go down to the river to pray. So, those three songs are from many different places and periods of Christian music. And one of the things that I want to talk about is how it's changed. And also, why I want us to go beyond the meanings that are given to us. I'll give you an example. It is a mystery that I want to talk about, is where the idea that the Magi, or the Magi, as they're called in the Bible, were called the kings. So we say, we three kings of Orient. It's pretty well known that they didn't come from the Orient, or the general Orient, but also some of the things that we believe about them are simply not true. So there was not gold, frankincense, and myrrh. That was an idea that was brought about to give the idea of kingly gifts to the baby. The Bible specifically says gold, frankincense, which is a type of frankincense, and myrrh. So we know because of the gifts where the Magi came from, because we know where that stuff comes from, and we also know why. So the Magi came to anoint a baby as a king. And they went and visited Herod first. And so this is like a mind-blowing thing for the time. But they didn't go to crown him as a king. All right? So I'm going to talk about king crowning. Because within 400 years of this incident, we went from a mystical, spiritual happening to a coronation of a king on earth. Why did we do that? You have to go back 1,000 years before that and understand that the prophecy within the Jewish world at the time was that there would be a Messiah. Now, we think of the word Messiah as Savior. Once again, we've changed the meaning of the word. But back then, the prophecy of a Messiah was simply to bring the Lord, the earthly king, together with the Christ, the spiritual king. And so Jesus is not the only Christ. They believed that when Jesus walked the earth, there were dozens of people who called themselves Christ. But the first Christ that we know of, and the first Lord that we know of, is Moses and Aaron. And so those two heads became one as they became partners, and they were separated at birth, basically. But when they came together to lead the people out of Egypt, they were a governmental head, the Lord, and a spiritual head, the Christ. And so the prophecy was that we would bring this together. What does that mean? In the African tradition, I wear the starry crown. And if you listen to the words of the song, and you say, who will wear the robe and gown? Who will wear the starry crown? As Westerners, we think of who's going to be the king? Who's our leader? Who's the head of us? But that's not what the song means. It is not so much about who will lead us, but how we will follow. So I have a fancy crown, right? All right. So this is made by my friend Terp, who is a rock and roll roadie, and has taken up crocheting simply for his arthritis and for his mental health. And so I really appreciate him making me a crown. And I have lots of crowns. I don't have as many hats as Arlen has, but I wear all kinds of hats, and they symbolize my priesthood, but they don't make me a king. When I was given my name, at the end of my name is I'm Baba Teddy Olujimi Ade. Ade means king. In the African way of thinking, Ade is something you do to yourself. We crown ourselves. Nobody gives us a crown. We do ceremonies. We do celebrations. We do ceremonies that venerate and do things. I actually had my head cut open and had little seeds put in. And that was my coronation. But I did that to myself. Around 400 AD, there was a shift in Christianity where they wanted to make sure that the political power of the church was the same as its spiritual power. And you saw the Caesars rise up against them. You know, crossing the Rubicon is not just, I crossed that line. Crossing the Rubicon is pagans stepping across where only Christians should be, and pagans who named themselves kings. And so, I don't know if you guys have read Holy Blood, Holy Grail, or any of those books, but those are all about this shift, this mystery, this change. At one time, all the kings of Europe believed they had a divine right and that they only spoke for God. At the same time, the church also believed they had a king that spoke for God. So when we say the vicar, we mean the man who vicariously speaks for God here on earth. That's a major shift. And how did that shift happen? Somebody said, these three kings came here as pagan kings to worship the one true king here on earth. But if you look at the early church, that's not what happened. What happened was that enlightened beings came to anoint an enlightened being who for the first time in history was a baby, was a child. So, our theme this month is mystery. Our idea of mystery very often is like Hercule Poirot. Does everybody know who that is? Agatha Christie. It's like a crime happens and we solve it. But sometimes crimes happen so slowly we can't see them. Sometimes the things that we see and believe have come upon us so easily and over so much time that we simply accept them. But there is a mystery in that photograph. There are several mysteries actually in that photograph. And in order to unravel the mystery, because we're going to take us towards a meditation, I want to go to my life. I used to live in Big Sur, California. And my teacher there was a man named Babatunde Olatunji. And Baba was an African priest. He was also a political science, and he's also probably the most famous African drummer. And so most people know him as an African drummer. But he was also like Forrest Gump, in that he was a witness to everything. He was everywhere. It's incredible, the stories that he would tell very often would be like, I was in the room when Mandela was arrested. Oh, not the second time, the first time. You know, I was in Havana when the Bay of Pigs crisis happened. I went to college with Martin Luther King. He was like that kind of a guy. And he would have stories. He would tell stories about all of these things. And one day he was telling me this story. And he was telling me this story about his friend, Giles Healy. And I said, well, I know Giles Healy. He was a famous archaeologist. So I don't know if you guys know this, but my majors are paleontology and archaeology, two things I've never made a penny with. And he says, oh, really, you know him? I said, yeah, he discovered the Bonampak. He was a photographer, a life photographer, who discovered these massive temples that were so beautiful and were so famous because he actually photographed them in some of the very first color photographs for Life magazine. And so he says, well, do you want to meet his son? And I said, of course I want to meet his son. He goes, well, that's him. Okay, so this is Esalen in California. And Baba, who is like 80 years old at this point, and I are sitting naked in a tub with a young man who's across from us. And so my first introduction to Giles Healy was him standing up naked and shaking my hand. Like his father, he was an astronomer, and he was also a photographer. And we began to talk, And he said, "Do you want to see something interesting?" And I said, "Yes." And so he took me up a little place called Partington Ridge. If you've ever read Henry Miller, you know Partington Ridge. If you've ever, there's like so many people who lived on this tiny little road that went up the mountain over the ocean that were all mystics. They all changed the world, and they all hid on this one mountainside, on this one road. And at the top of the road was a man who built a cement dome. And living in that dome after he was fired from Berkeley for climbing a flagpole naked, and he was like the most famous ethnomusicologist and native speaker. He spoke like 1,200 native languages from the West. But who also lived in his house was a guy named Kroeber, and Theodora Kroeber was his wife, and they were famous for being the authors of Isi or Ishi, the last Indian of his tribe. And so they were like these famous people, and they had a child, and their child was named Ursula Le Guin. And so up at the top of this mountain was this amazing little conclave of amazing people, and they all gathered around this man named Giles Healy. And Giles Healy had left, when he died, a whole bunch of things inside the cement dome. And so I went in there, and he showed me the Bonampak murals of the temple, and they had been recreated in like a miniature model form. But over in the corner, there was a small model, a maquette of a cave. And in that cave, I saw for the very first time a stone carving that I had no idea what it was. But I did know that it was important because for 15 years before that, I was doing what's called Mayan Schulten, which is a type of Mayan tarot. And the symbols from my tarot deck were all on this wall. And so I copied furiously this pyramid, step pyramid, that had a little guy crouching on it. And the little guy crouching, it looked like he was going to the bathroom, actually. He had 8 black dots going up his body. And I said, what is this? What does it mean? Because on the other side was like a overhead view of the same thing. So it looked like a cake from the side, but from the top, it looked like concentric circles. And they had all of these dots going down one side. And he says, well, I don't know, but I know who can tell you. And so we went to Dona Luisa, who was essentially a spy. She was a Quiche Maya code-talking woman. And she used her language to create codes that were indecipherable to the other side, because her language was so different than everybody else. And so she explained that what this was a man who was crowning himself, and those dots were what they called chokla. And so for the first time, I realized that chakras and choklas are the same thing. And I spent the whole day with this woman, and she said, oh yeah, they're the same thing: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, and in basically the same purposes in the same ways as the Hindu system. And I came away from there understanding that the things that I had understood as a person who studied yoga were universal. And when I became an African priest, I realized that what we call Iwaju, which means Ia Awo Oju, means the mother eyes of the body, that they were chakras as well. And that we as human beings, no matter where we are, work our way up the chakras and eventually are doing something called coronation. We are opening our corona. And it's this spiritual act, this universal act, that was stolen and made into an exclusive right of certain people to say, I wear the crown. Only I have been coronated. Only I can speak to God. Only I can hear God's voice. And that's just not new. Wherever monotheism took over from polytheism or from matriarchal pantheism, this happened. When you see the Pope wearing his hat that from the side looks like a fish, that is an ancient Babylonian hat that gave one man the ability to speak to God. What's my point here? Oh, my picture's gone. So, if there were a picture there, what you would see is 3 Magi and what we call the Holy Family. And if you notice, from the earliest times that we depicted this, they have halos. We have created this idea that only saints among us have halos. But if you go into the earliest church pictorials, you will find that after the Feast of Pentecost, all people had halos. So the mystery that I want to unravel is this place where we abdicated our authority, where we abdicated our own inner Christ, where our development, whether you believe in chakras or choklas or not, is based upon those things on the outside, be they a hat or the robe and gown, that those things are just metaphors. So, all right, so I'm a priest, right? And you assume that these are like holy vestments, all right? But this is simply a belt. It's just a belt. The thing that you see Jesus wear and you see priests wear around them or in scarves, they have these little scarves made, okay? These are robes. And a robe is just a cloth. And so this cloth is simply for me to wear when it rains. The cowl of a monk is simply a vestment. There's nothing holy or special about what I do and what I wear. I think that we want to mystify things. I think that we want to create mystery. I think that we want to put a distance between ourselves and our authority, our responsibility, our ability to crown ourselves. So what does that have to do with Epiphany? Epiphany used to mean, back when the pagans owned that word, epiphania, the Hellenistic pagans, we call them ethnicos, ethnics, heathens. Epiphania was the revelation of a goddess within you and your ability to exhibit that through self-coronation. Not God coming down into your head, but you exhibiting actually the goddess who comes out of your head. All right? So, mind blown. And then she comes out. That's Epiphany. All right? We switched it. Epiphany is only one person, only God, only to one person, and it's God revealing himself to that one special purpose and that one special person who gets to wear the crown. So around 1400, Epiphany became 3 kings making obeisance to the Jewish king. And that the Jewish king started a new religion and a new kingdom here on earth. And so the whole change in the meaning also changed our practice. We let go of the Christ within us. And I don't mean the Jesus Christ, I mean that Christ energy that resided in Aaron, but also resided in all of the prophets. Because the Lord and the Christ is the law and the prophets. We hear this language all the time. And we think of it as mysterious things. But we are the law and we are the prophets. And the miracle of Jesus' birth was not just the fact that he was a baby and was crowned, had a corona, had a halo, was holy, but that we all were. And that if you leave the idea of what religions have taught us and listen to his own words as a human, he says, all these things that I can do, you can do, and more. That's very, very different than what we believe about Epiphany. One last thing. Tomorrow's Epiphany. It's also 3 Kings Day, Tres Reyes. If you buy a king cake, you will see that some lucky dude gets to eat the little baby in the cake, and that person is king for a day. Those rituals come from Spain, come from gypsy people, come from Africa. And those are about how we are all a king. So today, we are in another pagan day. Anybody know what pagan day this is? It's 12th night. All right? So, before the Christian church put 12th night before Epiphany, it was the 12th night after Mother's Night, Modranicht. All right? So the pagans had Yule, and their Yule was anywhere from 0 to 1,000 days. But generally, they measured from the solstice, all right, winter solstice, Mother's Night Eve, to 12 days afterwards to find the new year. And the new year was called the 12th night. And Epiphania was the beginning of the new year. But 12th night is special to us, and special as we move into a meditation. On 12th night, especially in the Anglo-Saxon world where these rites were still observed, the 12th night was ruled by the Lord of Misrule. And on the 12th night, all the rules were out. And men dressed as women, slaves dressed as kings, servants dressed as masters. Every kind of idea about what was right or wrong was broken on 12th night, all the way till midnight, when the Lord of Misrule would be conquered by the kings. And the three kings of the Epiphany were always pagan kings. They were always the Magi. And they always came to put things back to rights. So, can I have a beat? I feel like American Bandstand. So if I could get you to close your eyes. And I know sometimes when I talk, it's a lot of information. It's a lot of like history and mystery and all kinds of stuff like that. But how do we take this home with us? How do we take the energy of 12th night into our own epiphany? If epiphany is something that's inside of you trying to get out, what is it that you're trying to change? What are the rules and the conventions that you abide by? What are the words and things that you accept because you were told that that's what they mean? What are the things that you intuitively know in your life that you need to change? And need a point from which to change it. You are not Saul on the road to Damascus. You will not have your horse struck by a bolt of light from the blue. The epiphany you seek comes from inside of you. The Christ you seek comes from inside of you. And the Lord that you seek comes from inside of you. We all here have years and years of bad habits to break, and we will not have an epiphany overnight and break the habits that we have. But I want you to meditate on the idea, what are the things you willing to change? What are the beliefs that you are willing to explore that may have different meanings than you actually thought? And what are the chakras, the chokolas, the iwaju, the eyes of your body that have closed their perceptions because you only use your mind? If your first instinct when I talk is to wish you had a notebook, what is it that you are not hearing? What is it that's not getting into you? And what is it that's not getting out? Because that's the most important thing. So I want to close with just the drum beat, as if it were your heart. And you didn't come here to hear me today. You came here to change something inside of you. You came here to begin your own epiphania, your own first step, your own release of whatever God or goddess is inside of you, waiting or trying to get out. And how are you going to change your mind for that to happen? As I walk down to the river to pray, studying about that good old way, and who shall wear the starry crown? Oh Lord, show me the way. Oh brother, let's go down, come on down. Oh, brother, let's go down to the river to pray. As I walk down to the river to pray, studying about that good old way, and who shall wear the foreign crown. Oh Lord, show me the way. Oh Father, let's go down, let's go down, come on down. Oh Father, let's go down, down to the river to pray. Namaste. Thank you so much for your attention.